My name is Andrea Bundon. I'm in the School for Sport here at Loughborough and with the Pierre Harrison Centre for Disability Sport. And I guess what I'm presenting here today is a little different from most of what you're seeing in that I'm kind of making the case for not looking professional online. A lot of what you're going to be seeing today is talking about developing a professional image for your project, for your research, and for yourself online. And well, I think that's useful for most academics. There are some specific examples where you might want to think about the benefit of being an amateur online. And it's all about understanding what you're trying to accomplish when you go online and who you're trying to connect with. So thank you for Ines, because she presented a really great example there of how they had this project, they had this research, and they were trying to communicate with different audiences and the different levels of audiences. But in the work I do, my goal is actually to use my online platforms to do the research. It's my field of research. So I need to make sure that the platforms I'm using are the platforms that my participants use, and that it's appropriate to my audience and the people I'm trying to engage with. So I'm going to use the example of, this was my doctoral work at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And what I was doing is I was working with a group of athletes with disabilities, members of the Paralympic team, and we wanted to go online to try to have some discussions online with other athletes about issues in the Paralympic movement, about current debates, policies of the Paralympic Games, how to recruit in parasport, things like that. And our goal was really to talk to other athletes, coaches, volunteers, those involved in the Paralympic movement, and we want to do that online because, as you may know, Paralympic sport is growing, but it's still a fairly limited number of athletes. Canada is a very big country. Going online is our only way of trying to actually get people involved in the discussions. So we decided to use a blog to do this, and we created a blog called Athletes First. And when I said we didn't brand it, we did have a logo and a tagline, sporting abilities and opinions, but that's pretty much where it ended. We didn't tie it into Facebook or Twitter, any other platform. We kept it on this blog. And our reason for doing that is we were really mimicking the blogs that other athletes had. We started this in 2011, and I mean, by the time 2012 Paralympic Games came around, pretty much every athlete on the Canadian team had a blog. It's a very popular platform for athletes to use. So we were looking at their blogs and basically using the same format that athletes were familiar with. And our other reason for doing this was people had attempted projects like this in the past, not as research projects, but for example, the International Paralympic Committee tried to create an athlete community on their website. The Canadian Paralympic team tried to create sort of like an online forum message board on their website. We'd seen numerous examples, and if you go to those online forums, they get like one post a year. Athletes just weren't signing up, they weren't participating. And in conversations when we were designing this project, one of the reasons that we heard was that they didn't want to talk with organizations. They didn't want to talk with the International Paralympic Committee. They wanted to talk with other athletes. So hence our idea that let's go to where athletes are, and that was really blogs like this one. The other reason that we didn't create, for example, a Facebook page and a Twitter account was that that's great when you want to start a new project from scratch. But we wanted to be able to link into the online presence that our team members already had. So rather than going to the Athletes First site and seeing sort of this project, we wanted to really convey that these are athletes who are currently competing, currently involved in sport, and if you want to find out more about them, go find them on Facebook, go find them on Twitter. So rather than having sort of one unified online presence, we were trying to tie into the networks that people already had. So when we, for example, would put a post up on the site, I mean, I would tweet it, but so would every member of the team. And this also allowed us to tie into, their existing followers. When we started the project, had maybe 50 followers on Twitter. I now have 600, which is not that many compared to some people in this room, but it's 550 more than I had when we started. Some of our blog team members did have several thousand followers when we started the project. So telling people to use the networks they already had was a way of tying into that rather than starting a new Twitter account that would have had 0 followers. The other reason was that there is sort of a tendency in online discussions to, you can start a conversation on a blog, but then what happens when you have a Facebook account and you automatically publish on the blog to a Facebook account is then you separate the conversation out. People read the post on Facebook rather than reading it on your blog, and you end up with different conversations happening. We wanted to try to encourage everyone to keep posting on the blog so that others could see the online conversations that were happening. So although we did advertise it ourselves on Facebook and stuff like that, we always did it in a way that tried to bring people back to the one site. Were we successful? There aren't many models in sports sociology for a project like this. I had no idea of what would be a good audience. And when we started the project, I talked to team members about, how many visitors would you say we need to call this project a success? How many people should join in the conversations? And the answers I got from our team members ranged from well, if we had 10 athletes, that'd be really great. If we had 10 athletes who were actively participating in the discussion, that'd be great. To others who were saying, oh, we need thousands and thousands. And we didn't know. We had nothing to base our expectations on. But after 14 months, the project had 6,500 visitors, 340 comments were made on the posts. And what impressed me about that was 340 comments is not that many. But an average blog post was about an average was 1,500 words long. The average comments were 500 words long. Sometimes the comments were 2,000 words long. People really took time to reply. They didn't just write, interesting post, thanks for writing. They actually took time to engage with the topic. And then others would take time to reply to their replies. So when I downloaded the comments at the end of the project, I had about 200 pages of single text comments. 97 countries were represented in the visitors, although 80% of our visitors were Canada, the US, the UK, and Australia. But it was actually quite interesting to watch, you can see where the visitors are coming from. And for example, if there was the Asian Parasport Games happening, suddenly I'd be getting a lot of visitors in Asia. If there was a Para-Nordic World Cup skiing event happening in Norway, I'd get 20 visitors that day from a tiny little town in Norway. So it was interesting to watch how the visitors were actually following different activities within the parasport world. And the other part that I found interesting was actually the time that people spent on the blog. I don't know if you've seen the statistics for how long people usually spend on a web page, but it's usually measured in seconds. The average view of a web page is seconds. The average view on one of our pages was almost 2 minutes. And what actually would happen is a new blog post would go up on a Monday morning, and the average that day would be about 15 minutes. And then the average by Friday would be about 1 minute. And so my interpretation is I would usually go read the blog post myself, time how long it took me to read it, and that would be pretty close to the average of that day. Later in the week, it gets shorter because people were going back to read the comments. They're no longer going back to read the blog post. So I was pretty impressed. I thought 2 minutes per page was pretty good engagement. And actually, that's pretty much the end of what I want to say, because we'll have some time to do some breakouts. But what I'm really trying to convey here is that when you're thinking about how you're going to use online tools in your research, you need to think about what you're trying to do. And sometimes, obviously, that is presenting a very professional, a very LinkedIn, a very sort of consistent image online. Sometimes that's trying to connect with what's already there. And for us, that was connecting into our existing online networks of athletes. I'm also going to come back to, does anyone recognize this photo? This is the opening ceremonies of the London Olympic Games. And what was happening on the main stage was Tim Berners-Lee, sort of this weird montage with like dancing computers, and he's in the middle typing on a computer. And Tim Berners-Lee is the guy who invented the World Wide Web. I mean, he launched the first website. It was like from one computer on his desk to another computer on another desk, but hyperlinking was invented. And that was what they were referencing in the opening ceremonies. He was on the center stage, and he sends out a tweet. And the tweet is, "This is for everyone." And it appears in LED lights all around the stadiums. And what he's referencing is really that social project of the internet, or of the World Wide Web, sorry, I should say. The internet was militaries, universities, and governments trying to find ways of sharing information, sharing computing power. The World Wide Web was really about connecting individuals. And Tim Berners-Lee and the other founders of the World Wide Web Consortium were very insistent that the web should be of benefit to all. And this is really the history of community-based journalism, community media, and the web. And that's where I see my work fitting in, is this idea of trying to connect different communities and different networks online. So when I'm doing that, I'm thinking about what are the tools and platforms people are already using, and how can I leverage those to do the research? And I'll end it there.